Stones that can record? Brings new meaning to rock music. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, recommend you check out our introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below and it'll give you a good overview of what the Horror Movie Syllabus is all about. We check out a particular subgenre of horror and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore, but that's not what we're doing today because this is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where you guys give me a recommendation in the comments, something that I haven't seen before, a horror movie that I haven't seen before. I check it out for the first time and then I let you know if I think it's syllabus worthy. Is it good enough, notorious enough, etc. to make it onto the horror movie syllabus? And today we're looking at a movie called The Stone Tape. And The Stone Tape was recommended to us by the Rose Bride, aka friend of the channel, Sarah, who has recommended many a good movie, and she recommended this one twice. She recommended this one in her comment to the UK video, the United Kingdom movies video that we did, saying that it was a quintessential British ghost story and kind of giving us a very, very vague high-level idea that it was just a noteworthy British ghost movie. And then she mentioned again in our time travel video, in the comments to that, where she was talking about Last Night in Soho and how the movie tended to seem to follow the stone tape theory. More on that later. But so referencing it twice, bringing it up twice, meant that it should have been one that had to be paid attention to, right? It's one that I kind of started to front load a little bit as I was going through the list. Say, we should check this one out soon. And so we did. We checked it out, and I had no idea about it. No idea whatsoever. I knew it was an older movie. Sarah tends to like older movies, so that was that. I knew it was British, and I knew it was ghosts. And that was it. Went in blind. And, well, did I like it? Did I hate it? Let's find out. Like I said, the movie we're talking about today is The Stone Tape. The Stone Tape came out in 1972 and was written by Nigel Neal. And he is pretty well known for being like a sci-fi type screenwriter. I think his most famous creation is the Quartermass character, but he's done a lot of work, a lot of writing. He's pretty well known. And this is maybe one of his more notorious works. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know that it really measures up with all of his work, but it's got its own pedigree and history. But we're going to get into all of that in just a second. First, if you haven't seen it before, the movie is about a group of scientists who wind up setting up in an old, apparently haunted British mansion, a Victorian mansion, to do some work or some research investigating new ways to find audio recordings like tapes and stuff like that to compete in the market against the Japanese. And while there, they discover that there are apparently ghosts in the mansion, but they start to theorize that maybe the ghosts are recorded past incidents that have been captured in the stone walls of the mansion. And they start exploring that as an idea, possibly to exploit it for money, and hijinks abound, sort of, I guess. But we're going to get into that a little bit more fully. I'll stop there and let it not be spoiled. But this movie is interesting for a number of reasons. But right off the bat, the first thing we have to address, because it's the first thing that hit me when I started watching this movie, is that it's a TV movie. And I didn't realize at first that it was a TV movie. I just thought it looked really cheap and everything kind of seemed flat and just didn't look very good. And it just seemed like it was made for TV because it was made for TV. And when I started doing the research, I'm like, oh, okay, this explains a lot. It explains a lot. But early on in the movie, I found this to be rather off-putting. There was a lot of telltale signs. The way that this was set up was very flat and it looked very stagey. It looked like 70s British, like BBC style TV. Really, if you know what that looks like, 70s, 80s, you have an idea of what I'm talking about. It just they had some ghost effects in there, but the ghost effects were very weak. They were not terribly impressive, and they were by no means were they scary. And this was a bit of an issue early on. I really did not like the way this looked. I was very off put by it. It kind of felt like it was staged like a play, and sure enough, like when you look in Wikipedia, it often references it as a play. It's a TV movie, but it keeps referencing it as a play, which makes it feel kind of like maybe it was a play that was just being filmed for television. But it doesn't. It has special effects. It has sets. It's not like it doesn't look like just somebody filming a stage. So I don't think that's really the case, but it has that feel, and that's not a great thing. The flat lighting, the whole TV atmosphere of it, made for there to be no real true dread or scares. This movie is devoid of scares. There's no atmosphere to it. There's no mood, like there's just none of it's creepy enough or just giving you that edgy feeling, that feeling of dread. None of it's there. And you can say, oh well, it's a cheap TV movie, so what can they do? But then I think about like Dark Shadows, which was a cheap TV movie from the 60s. And that had atmosphere, and it had some gothic feel to it that this movie felt like it was lacking. So that was a big problem. And honestly, I mean, right off the bat, the first 5 minutes, I'm just like, oh, I'm out on this movie. This movie is not gonna work for me. I I was really worried about it, but I stuck with it, and I'm kind of glad I did because the next thing that came out was the actors. And it's a large cast, but you're really only focusing on like three or four main people, and in particular, the main guy played by Michael Bryant. Michael Bryant, pretty accomplished British actor, and he is extremely compelling in this movie. And everybody in the movie is actually quite good, and it's well, almost everybody. We'll get to that, and it's important because they're what's driving the good part of this movie, which is the concept and the story. So Michael Bryant comes in and he is the guy leading this research project, and he's a little bit of an ass, and he's really pushy, but he's really also really charismatic, and so he really carries this movie. He's the lead, and he carries this movie because he's just compelling. He's not necessarily what I'd call likable, but he's watchable. And so slowly I started getting drawn back in. I thought I was going to be out on this movie, but he starts drawing me back in. And then you've got Jane Asher in there as the female lead. And I'll be honest, her character is underwritten, but she's good in the role. And for those of you who don't know, Jane Asher was the girlfriend for Paul McCartney back in the 60s and inspired many, many great Beatles songs. And as you guys know, I'm a Beatles fan. So seeing Jane Asher in there was kind of cool. But it's her character is underwritten. It's like she's not given a lot to do, but she's still giving a good performance. She's making the most out of a character that probably needed to be fleshed out a little bit more. And then the supporting cast is doing a really solid job too of selling this premise. And it's noteworthy because the premise is the strength of the movie. We're going to get into it in just a second here, but honestly, having these actors sell it to you in a very organic and realistic way is what brought me back from the brink of this movie, from being out on it. Was the performances really selling me this premise? And again, it's not that everybody's great. There's this guy, this competing scientist who's trying to figure out how to make a wash machine, who seems to be in a completely different movie. He's very big, he's very ridiculous and kind of showy and just not giving the same performance as everybody else. He's in the wrong movie. I think he's supposed to be comic relief, but he's not particularly funny. He has no need to be in the movie at all. They could have just cut him out of it. It's really kind of a weird misstep, but everybody else in the movie, solid to very good work. And it's interesting because while these characters aren't all very fleshed out outside of maybe the lead character played by Michael Bryant, they are interesting and noteworthy, and like their dialogue is sharp. And even though like this movie is like full of like casual racism and sexism and misogyny, but it all feels very authentic. A, it's 1972, and B, the way people are talking, the people talk in this movie kind of feel like the way people talk. It gives it a little bit of a verisimilitude. People feel normal. They feel real. And I liked that. I think that was important for the movie, even though, like I said, some of the stuff they're saying could be a little off-putting. I bought into it, and it made me buy into the premise, which is really where the strength of this movie lies. This concept that old houses or old stones or old anything can kind of record past traumatic or important events, and they get embedded in the stone, and then you have to figure out a way to unlock them and hear them. That's interesting. It's so interesting that it has actually become, or has actually wound up naming a theory for ghosts. This is a theory that predates the movie. This idea that the structures or the physical things in the world kind of have an impression left on them by traumatic events, and that's what ghosts are. It's like these impressions that are embedded in rock and stone and things like that. It's called the stone tape theory. after this movie. This movie really popularized this idea of traumatic impressions being left behind and then being deciphered by other people. So, really interesting concept. And what I like about this movie, which is it's fun because it's kind of balancing science versus supernatural, which is not something that's terribly new now, but maybe it was a little more fresh then. But it's a really always a really fun idea to see how science and the supernatural mesh and how much they don't mesh. And doing that here is fun. And even though, like, right off the bat, I was kind of like, why the hell are these scientists going to a Victorian mansion to work? Why wouldn't they be in some sort of facility that could actually facilitate their experiments? Why are they in there? And honestly, it doesn't tremendously make a lot of sense from the story, but in the research, apparently, Nigel Neal had visited the BBC R&D department, which was in an old Victorian mansion that had been repurposed for that use. So that's where he got the idea. And you know what? Why not? I've given way more to movies in terms of premise for giving a premise than this, so I have no problem with that. And I like how they are able to then leverage their setting for inspiring their research, because the idea that they're looking into recordings and then like how to compete with the Japanese and how to get new technology to record, and then finding this theory that stones can record past events, and how can you leverage that? How can you market that? How can you commercialize that? That was interesting to me. I loved that idea. The idea that they were trying to figure this out for commercial purposes, not for the betterment of science, not for, well, and that's part of the debate of the movie is like some of the people want to try to do right by these ghosts or try to figure out the mystery or whatever. And the main guy, he sees a goal here. I could maybe make this into money. I could maybe make this into a revolutionary new product. I liked that. That's a neat take on it. And again, the actors are selling me on this in a way so that this it doesn't seem ridiculous at all. It does seem to work. And apparently this movie was very influential, not just in terms of naming this concept or this theory about trauma, ghosts being trauma that's recorded in stone or whatever. But it was also influential in many writers and movie makers. You know, John Carpenter says that this was an influence for Prince of Darkness, even though Nigel Neal kind of bashed that, which is, you know, frankly uncool in my opinion. But Steven Spielberg has mentioned that it's an influence for Poltergeist. Both him and Toby Hooper have said that. I think like writers like Grant Morrison have cited this as an influence. There's a lot of famous people who have seen this movie who extol its virtues and praise its ideas. And I think that the ideas are noteworthy to be praised. I think they're worthy of being praised because it's an interesting concept. It's an interesting theory. Obviously, it kind of spun out, and it's an interesting way of telling the story. But is it interesting enough to overcome the shortcomings I mentioned and make it onto the horror movie syllabus? Let's find out. So, is the Stone Tape syllabus worthy? Nah, not really. I mean, the pedigree of this movie, the whole influence that it's had, it makes it a close call, closer than I would have thought when I first started watching it, frankly. But it doesn't ultimately make the cut for me. And the reason why is because as important as this movie arguably is, and I'd say it's a pretty good argument with the idea that it actually winds up naming an actual theory about ghosts and all of the influences it had on these noteworthy people in horror and just in writing and fiction in general. Obviously important. It doesn't really quite make that impact for me for the simple reason that I didn't even know about it. I'd never heard of the movie before Sarah mentioned it. I didn't know the phrase stone tape theory. I didn't know that that was a thing. I don't really delve into ghost theory all that much. It's not really something that I've spent a lot of time on. So maybe some of you who are more into ghosts and stuff like that are like, yeah, stone tape theory. It's totally well known. And you know, so okay, fair enough. But for me and for my syllabus, I didn't know about it. So if I didn't know about it, then it's not really living up to that pedigree exactly for me. You know, everybody's talking about how noteworthy and important this is, but I didn't know about it, and it doesn't mean like I'm the end all and be all, but it is my syllabus. So I I I like I said, I gave it a good thought because of its reputation, because of the influence it's had, and because of this pedigree. But at the end of the day, it just didn't make the cut for me. And the reason why is this production values. Honestly, that cheap looking TV setting just, yeah, even though the movie drew me in interestingly, like I was interested in what was happening. I wanted to know where the story was going to go. I liked the concept a lot. The movie itself, just as a horror movie, it just kind of failed. It just wasn't scary. It wasn't scary at all. And it wasn't even like oh, it just didn't scare me, because there's a lot of horror movies that don't scare me, but like it didn't even have like any kind of atmosphere. It didn't have any. It was just so flat. It just really didn't have any kind of style to it, or any kind of just cool aesthetic or anything to latch onto. And so I was kind of like, and they, not for nothing, but like a lot of the stuff that's going on feels very dated. And I'm not talking about like the technology and stuff like that, even though that is. I'm talking about some of the ideas, like I said, the casual racism and sexism and stuff like that. It doesn't really bother me per se, because it's a sign of its times and it really felt authentic and real. But like the things like Jane Asher not being able to park her car at the beginning of the movie, like what the hell is that about? Like it just felt so weird. Like I don't know, like it's a testament to the movie that it was able to draw me back in, even though the first 10, 15 minutes, it felt like it lost me right away. So I'll give it that credit for sure. But it just wasn't hitting for me. And I think a large part of it is because it's made for TV. If it were a theatrical movie and it could have gone a little bit more dark and a little bit more creepy and a little bit more challenging, and then make the scary stuff actually scary, put some stakes in there where some people are in actual danger, then maybe this movie crosses over the line for me a little bit. But as it stands, what it has is a lot of really cool ideas and concepts, a cool story, but the execution is not there for me. Honestly, I kept thinking this would probably make a really good book. In fact, when I looked at did the research and looked it up, I was looking, is there a book version of this? Because I'd probably be interested in a book version, but it seems like it actually was a screenplay, because the ideas are really interesting. And I think spelled down to a book and explored in a book would be a fascinating read. I'd be down for this as a book. Horror book syllabus, it makes the cut. Horror movie syllabus, not so much. So that's me. I know that that's probably a little disappointing to some of those people who are fans of this. Sarah, looking at you, but it's okay. It's okay, because it's just my syllabus. If you think it belongs in your syllabus, by all means, put it on there. It's definitely. I'm obviously in the minority on this based on the reputation this movie has, and it's kind of surprising, frankly, that I didn't know about it. But it's fine. It's not for me. It falls short for me, but again, not a bad movie. I thought it was a bad movie. It's just not a particularly great movie either, and definitely not going to make the cut for the syllabus for me. So that's my thoughts on the Stone Tape. I suspect that those of you who have seen it may have different thoughts. Based on what I've read, it's got a very good reputation. So let me know in the comments below what you think, Sarah. I know you'll be letting me know, and I'm looking forward to that. And I'll talk about it more in the comments below. Again, didn't hate it, just wish that the production values were better so that it was a little bit creepier and a little bit cooler. And now it's time to get cool and look at a horror trivia pursuit card. Maybe one of the worst transitions I've ever had. I know. So this is a movie dealing with the supernatural. So we're going to look at the supernatural category in the card. I'm going to try to answer it here live on camera. And here's the question. In 2013's Mama, for how many years are Victoria and Lily missing? This is an interesting one. Like, as you know, I don't do well with names, but I don't need to do well with names here, because from context, I can tell who they're talking about in the card. So Mama, arguably an underrated movie. I think it was Andy Muschietti who directed that movie. The guy who did It, I think. Don't quote me on that. But that's a pretty underrated movie in my opinion. I know like mixed reviews or whatever, but the idea that these girls that get taken off to this cabin and get raised by some supernatural thing or whatever, and then get adopted or whatever. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I may be missing the details a little bit there, but good movie. Jessica Chastain, right? So yeah, I love Chastain. So I know that the characters, Victoria and Lily, must be the two girls, right? The two girls are raised. So how many years are they missing? That I'm not sure about. It's not a lot. It's enough time for them to grow up a bit, though. So I'm going to be taking a guess. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to be taking a guess. Like I said, the movie's good, and it never really. Maybe it'll make it on the syllabus at some point. It hasn't been on the syllabus yet. I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it has not been on the syllabus. I think it might wind up being on the syllabus, but it's a fringe movie. It's like it could go either way. I think it's better than people give it credit for, but I also don't think it's amazing. So definitely worth a watch. And yeah, this is arguably a major plot point is that they've been missing, but the time period I don't think is that important. So it's just not there. It's not there. I don't remember. So I'm going to be taking a guess. And part of the challenge here is the idea is that the girls grow up a bit while they're missing, right? And they're in the woods or whatever. And so my problem is I don't really gauge children's ages super well. Like, until they're like teenagers, they all look the same age to me. They're they're like toddlers. They're like all toddlers are like 2, and then like all children are like 10. And then when you're a teenager, I start to see the differences. Like so I'm bad when it comes to child ages. So that's not helping me much to like kind of deduce. Well, they look like they're this age when they're found. So I'll do the math. I ain't got that. I ain't got that. So I'm just gonna take a guess. Wrap up your thoughts on this too. I've given you plenty of time. Lock in your answer. So my guess is going to be 8. They were out there for 8 years. Now they're a little older. Now they're about 10, 12 years old or whatever. And so now they're the age they are in the movie. So 8 is my answer. I'm going to go with 8. Let's take a look. 5 years. 5 years is the answer. So I got that one wrong. And obviously I don't even feel that bad about it because I don't. Like I said, the movie, it's been a while since I've seen it. I don't remember it super clearly. I've only seen it the one time, I think. And so, yeah, okay, it is what it is. I got that wrong. I'm guessing some of you got it right. If you've seen that movie, maybe you got it right. Was it a really noteworthy thing in 5 years? Like, is 8 years just too much when the kids have been teenagers? Like, I don't even, like, I don't know. I don't know what kids are supposed to be, like, their ages when they look at them. I have no idea what they're supposed to look like at that age. So, anyways, I got it wrong. I suck. I've been doing pretty good lately too, so I guess I was due for a wrong answer. So there it is. Hopefully you got the right answer, and if you got a wrong answer like me, I don't know. I'd say tell me what you guessed, but it's just a number, right? So it's not as funny as usual. Unless you did manage to get something funny, let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you've got other cool recommendations for me. Anything that I haven't seen, it gets put on the to watch list, and maybe I make a video about it and we talk about it then. But this is the one we talked about. We can talk about it more in the comments and talk about any other movies you want to talk about. Let's keep the conversation going. Until then, I'll see you in the comments later. But for now, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.